Hi and welcome to OUTthink. I'm Lawrence Akers. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, a member of the LGBTQI community, and a passionate advocate for mental health. These podcasts have been made in the hope of sharing insight into issues that impact on the LGBTQI community. Today, we're continuing our conversation with Joe Busdell, who's going to talk about what it's like to find yourself becoming disabled after a life of perfect health. If you're comfortable with it, let's talk about sex. Baby. You realise there's a whole lot of listeners out there just rolling their eyes right about that. But in what way did this condition affect your sex life and your perception of sex?
Well, firstly, all my energy was taken up with the nerves healing. So your libido is really sort of gone. And I think mentally as well, I tried to masturbate, I tried to watch porn, and I just didn't find any interest in it. I found it a bit, not boring, but, it was exhausting. I found it exhausting. So at the beginning, there was nothing sexual. And I remember I was in hospital and I was recovering at home, and I would still, old habits never die. I would go on scruff and I would be getting hit on, and I'd be sort of lying. Because I wanted to feel like I wanted to belong, or I wanted to feel normalized. And then I'm thinking, what am I doing? Like, I can't even get out of bed. I can't go and see them, or they're not going to come here. I'm at my mum's house. So really quickly, I had to unpack all that and then stop, going on those apps and all that sort of stuff. And so then as I started recovering, I think physically I probably could engage, but I had to process was the mental part of it, like the stuff I was talking about with the body. How are people going to view me? I still can't, at this point, 18 months on, I still can't get off the floor if I was on the floor. So how do I negotiate with someone that I probably, can't get on the floor if they want me to go on the floor, or if I fall, that, I've got to be helped. So I found that a little bit uncomfortable because I was honest with people. And so a lot of guys would just block me or not reply back once I disclosed that I was going through a disability. So that was interesting. And to be honest, I didn't really explore that well enough to get enough of, enough stats to say there were people that would engage versus people that wouldn't, because I just sort of gave up, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it was just, I just thought for my own sanity, I just didn't want to play that game.
I can imagine it would be quite confronting to go into something like Scruff and to be greeted with that kind of rejection when you share. You wouldn't want to repeatedly go back and get slapped in the face for that.
Well, I just put it, I didn't think of it that way more. I just thought of it more that it wasn't the right forum to actually, I just saw it more as a funneled forum for men to find sex, and, there wasn't really a norm for disability on that side. So I seeked out other ways, and, it's a whole new world out there for me where I discovered that there was forums for disabled gay men, and there was forums for buying disabled aids. Like, you could buy slings and harnesses and sex toys and all that for people in wheelchairs. And it was mind blowing to think that it's all hidden away. Like, so, as a gay community, I wanted to become an advocate for the fact that disabled men, still have a brain, they still have a functioning penis, they still can have sex, but their legs may not work, but we still view them as either damaged or broken, because that's how I felt. I felt like I was damaged or broken. And, even to the point where I considered hiring an escort because I didn't want to feel damaged or broken. I wanted to feel whole. And I don't think I had the courage or the opportunity to find that from a person on Scruff or online, so it was a little bit of a disconnect there with where do I go to feel that again? Mm. Yeah.
So I guess you're kind of at an advantage in a sense that you are a therapist, and so your ability to understand how the mind works and how emotions play with that is potentially far greater than people who aren't therapists. So this question is kind of two-part in a really long-winded way. Firstly, what did you do that you found worked for you to help keep you going through this condition? And secondly, for listeners out there who may be experiencing this, who may have found themselves in this situation recently, what advice would you give to them to help them to cope?
The thing that kept me going was my family, I think, and those close friends. I was very, very lucky that I stumbled across a guy called Sarion White online, who is a spiritual guide and a course facilitator. And I just, happened to see an email where he was selling his $900 course for $29.99, and I bought it. And I have to say with all my heart that changed my life, because his whole course was called Engaging in the Flow. And it was like the universe told me, or gave me that as a gift, because I did the course and it was all about surrendering. It was all about not attaching. It was all about being in the moment. It was all about trusting that you're going to be okay. Even if you've got money or you've got no money, even if you're disabled or you can run, everything is possible. So it was like the right time. So he helped me. Because once I grasped those concepts, and yes, I agree, I'm a therapist, but being a therapist doesn't mean that I'm capable of actually telling myself to be okay. I feel like he told me that I was okay. So that helped. So I believe that even though I didn't know if I was going to walk again, that there was possibility for me to make my life anything I want to be in that situation. I had my mind, which was a good thing. My mind was still sharp. So that was good. So I think that's what got me through that. And I also am a strong believer that I was meant to go through this change. I didn't think I was going to go through this change via disability. Woof, that was a big one. But I knew that I was going to go through a change because I could feel something before I got sick that I wasn't happy with. Funnily enough, even though I say my friends abandoned me, I think the reality was that I wanted to get rid of them anyway. But I didn't know how. I wasn't satisfied with some of the things I was doing. I didn't know how to change that. So that sort of got me through as well, thinking, well, okay, the universe was obviously trying to give me warning signs, but I didn't listen. So then it said, stop, Joe, we're going to make you do it. So that got me through believing that concept. The second part of the question, I guess, is what would I advise people to do? And funnily enough, one of my closest friends, just recently broke some vertebrae in a car accident, and it's like he's me 18 months ago. And so I'm actually doing that, I'm fulfilling this question daily with him. I'm giving him advice that I wish I had. So the advice that I would give if someone is faced with a crisis is, firstly, you need to stop. I think we're either trained or we believe that we need to run still. We need to sort of avoid it. So face it, surrender, and actually face the fact and tell yourself, I'm broke, or I've just broken up with someone, or I've got anxiety, or I'm disabled. Whatever the situation is face it. Because then in that reality is when the solutions come. When you're, trying to hide it or trying to run away from it, or, in my friend's case, for example, he broke his back. 6 weeks ago, he broke his back. And he's thinking that it's going to get better tomorrow. And, so realizing that it's going to take a while for his bones to fuse back together, for his nerves to work, for him to be able to stand up again properly is the surrendering. So that's a really big lesson for me. And I use that now with all my clients, is that we are either victims or creations of a society that is so impatient. We want everything now. On top of that, I think gay men want everything even quicker. So, that's the thing. It's like, how do you just accept the fact that you were once, dancing under a mirror ball and now you're being bathed by your mother? Or how do you accept the fact that you were once sexually active and now you're, not? Again, it's all surrendering, because it doesn't mean that it's going to be like that forever. And that's the biggest thing that I've learned from this, is that what I experienced March last year to now is that it's changed. So much has changed. The things that I couldn't do a year ago, I can do now. And it feels like a blink, Lawrence. It doesn't feel like it was a year ago. It feels like it was just a blink. So that's a really important thing, that, yes, people say time goes quickly, but at the same time also is where you learn and where you develop. And, that's why they call it growth. You can't grow without going through something.
You were talking about the warning signs as well, earlier, about your own warning signs and just thinking you're working hard and getting overstressed. For people out there that are listening and thinking, I hear myself here, I hear that I've got these warning signs happening, what would you say to them?
Well, I'd say that you, when you notice something and you know yourself that you're noticing it, just take a moment again to stop and just really understand what that is. I mean, I look back now and think, how stupid was I? I was going blind in one eye, and I still got on a plane and went to San Diego to go to a conference. And I remember walking through the streets of San Diego at 7:30 at night, blind as a bat. Right? I couldn't see. It was so dark. And I'm thinking, I'm in an unknown area. You know, I could be walking into anything. And, you know, that was a big sign. You know, if, for example, the other signs are thoughts, I can go into this a lot deeper, but I'll just, as a quick version of it, is that I think that it's your values are speaking to you, or you want to call that your intuition. You know, they're signs. And I think that a lot of us don't listen to our intuition, especially when it comes to behavioral things like, I shouldn't be doing that, but you do it anyway. I shouldn't be having that drug or that cigarette or that cookie or that, Kentucky Fried Chicken because I want to, be healthy, or I want to lose weight, or I want to have a better life. But we do it anyway. And is it laziness? I don't know. But, the thing is that I think to move forward in this day and age with things moving so fast is that you need to pay attention to those signs. Because I believe through my own experience that as the signs accumulate, you then face a crisis. And the crisis is when you have to stop. And that could be a number of different things. For me, it was being in a wheelchair and not walking. But for another person, it may be getting depression, or it could be, breaking up with someone and not knowing what to do. It could be not having any money. It's that crisis that makes you change. So I don't know. I don't know what more to sort of how else to prompt people to actually notice. I mean, you've got to find time in your day in a busy life that we live just to stop through meditation or through just being alone and quiet, just to listen.
I think also there's an element of self-worth in there as well. I know some people who are constantly unwell, who constantly complain about ill health. And if I raise with them, you should really get that looked at, the response I get back is, oh, I'll be all right. I'll be all right.
That's another thing of society, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? And it's almost like, well, you might be all right, but you might not as well. And so, not that I want to take worst case scenario or be a prophet of doom, but you certainly want to be able to be accountable for your own health when you start to notice that it's declining.
Well, I think that, again, I'm only getting this information from being a therapist, so I don't know if it's true or not, but I know from this, my clients, is that a lot of people would rather put worth on other things than themselves. And I think that's a normal Western culture thing. What I learned when I got sick was, meditation and sound therapy and being quiet really helped. So I now religiously wake up at 5 o'clock and meditate. And the days I don't, I notice the difference. So it takes a bit of courage and commitment to listen to those signs. I think that if people pay attention, they're lucky because they're going to avoid the crisis. But if they don't, the crisis will come in one way or another. It may not come tomorrow or next week, but it will come. Again, I just think that we're living in a world that's so fast that we can't sustain the speed. If you notice just in my own family, for example, I'm noticing more and more people getting sick as well. With really cancers and brain tumors and all that. I'm thinking why is it happening all of a sudden? And, it could be what we're eating. It could be not having time to exercise. It could be that we're watching more TV. It could be that we're looking at our iPhones more often, and all those sort of things are going to accumulate. They're all, if someone, for example, is looking at their iPhone all the time, has got a sore neck, then you would think that he'd go and get a massage, or you'd think that that person might say, I am going to have a break from my iPhone, but we don't. And that's the difficult thing. How do we get someone to pay attention?
I think that also comes back to all or nothing thinking as well, where people may, and you said before, it doesn't have to be forever in certain cases, but people may view that they need to change a certain behavior, and that certain behavior needs to be changed forever in order to reach the destination they want to get to. That may or may not be true. If you have a terrible drug addiction, for instance, then staying away from that drug is obviously going to be crucial to where you need to go. But if it's about avoiding a cookie, we've got to put this into perspective about how much of an impact it's going to have over time.
But I still think that it's either the cookie or the drugs. It's still avoidance, and that's again just saying that it's the courage again. And so people. One thing I think that I've noticed is that people think that I find it really interesting when people say to me, "Oh my God, you're so brave," and "Oh my God, you're so amazing." It's no, I'm surviving. It's the survival. So when you're not sick or faced with the crisis, you are just living. But when you've got the crisis, you have to survive. And so that's the difference. And even though I've, learned a lot from this survival, I would not wish it upon anyone. So I'm a really strong advocate now of telling people, clients, friends, family, that's a sign. Are you listening to the sign? Because eventually it'll catch up. It will catch up. We all get older. Our bodies are slowly dying, really. And people don't want to listen, I think, because, again, it's an assumption I'm about to make, but I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with facing their own stuff. Secondly, for men, it's even more uncomfortable because, I don't want to meditate, or I don't want to acknowledge that I've got a problem. I can get through this. And it could be just the fact that they've been brought up with stoic fathers. Also, I think as a society, going back to your Facebook comment, I think that's a really big one, is that everyone posts or paints a picture that everything's okay. And when people post things that aren't okay, again, be honest, listeners, do you cringe? Because really what's happening is that person's just being vulnerable. And do we really allow that person to be vulnerable, to allow themselves to be whole? I mean, I try to, and I know there are a few people, or a lot of people on my page that do, but maybe you're surrounding yourself with people that don't allow that. So maybe you're not allowing yourself. I mean, so even in the gay community, we sometimes don't give support to people that may be feeling anxious or maybe feeling uncomfortable, people that are depressed or people that are disabled. And even though we know that there is those supports through the VAC and other organizations, it's more important to me now to find ways to advocate ways for just the general populace just to sort of acknowledge that our community is different, rather than, in some way for myself, it's reminding me of what I stupidly did when I was thinking about the body. I thought I had to belong in this niche sort of group. And what it really does when you do that is it just isolates you from all the other people. And I'm now more and more and more aware that being gay doesn't mean that I need to go drinking, or doesn't mean I need to go partying and take drugs, or doesn't mean that I need to have sex with 1,000 people, or doesn't mean that I need to be involved in orgies that are advertised on Scruff. I could be many, many things. And the good thing about that experience is that now I'm being introduced to all these men that are on the same page through either Facebook or through other friends. And it's really nice. And again, so that's probably an advantage of going through what I've gone through.
It is interesting you say that, though, because of the fact that those resources exist for people who are disabled and gay. Yet as a gay community, if you're not going out actually looking for it, you wouldn't see it that often. You don't really see that many people with disabilities out on the gay scene.
I don't know. I think that they probably want to, but I don't know if it's inclusive. I mean, one of the things I noticed over the last 18 months is that we pride ourselves in thinking that we live in a disability conscious environment, but how hard it is to navigate. Like, there were so many times I had to go into buildings that there was no lifts and I couldn't climb stairs, and so I couldn't go into those venues. Or there's times when I had to not go to the Ed Sheeran concert because my ticket didn't allow me to change it to disability. It's just, you just don't realize how uneven some roads are, or how uncomfortable it is for someone to try and get a wheelchair in a doorway that doesn't allow the wheelchair to enter. So, in the gay scene, again, there may not be that ability to let the people with disability feel comfortable there, or even it could just be the inclusiveness of the people. I mean, I'm sure people probably would say, no, hold on a sec, we want to be open and friendly. And I believe that. But at the same time, for myself, there wasn't something where I felt confident to try it. Like, it made me more anxious to think of me going to the lead in a wheelchair. I felt really uncomfortable, and that's my stuff. It's nothing to do with the lead or to do with the people going to the lead, but I felt uncomfortable because I didn't have what I thought was a supportive gay network that encouraged me. Like, none of my friends sort of said, let's go out, or I'm going to come and get you, let's go out. They would all say, in a way, just stay away. Their message was rest, which I needed to anyway. So it's hard. I remember when I was in my 20s, and I remember you were working at the Exchange, and there used to be a gentleman that used to come in there in a wheelchair every Thursday night and just on his own. And I used to be so impressed, going, oh my God, this guy is just coming down the street, coming down Commercial Road on a wheelchair, coming into the Exchange, getting a drink and just mingling through that packed venue. And
he was always the loveliest of guys as well. Like, he always had, coloured flags on his wheelchair. He always had a big smile. He always said hello. He was a very genuine soul.
Yeah. But don't you think that there would be more guys out there that are disabled that just aren't doing that? If I think about all the times I've been out, I could probably count on one hand the amount of times or the amount of people I saw that were disabled. Like, I remember seeing, a guy with an amputated leg. I remember seeing, I think, a blind guy, but you don't really see them. So I'm sure that there are gay disabled people out there. And what do they do?
That was kind of my point before. Yeah. And you know what? We have discussed this, Jen, before. And there's a part of me that feels like the word courage is appropriate, but then there's another part of me that feels like that's almost condescending to say that, because I don't think he viewed it as courage. He viewed it as going out and having a beer and connecting with his community. But for us, we'll kind of look at him and going, isn't it great that he's getting out there and not allowing his disability to hold him back? And I do feel a real incongruence internally about that, about why do I feel that it is courage when he is just a person who happens to be disabled going out and enjoying a beer with his community?
Well, I think there's an element of courage. For me, the courage wasn't about going out into the pub and having a beer. The courage for me was that he would navigate through the streets. Because going back to my point about things not being even and access, I know that I isolated myself for a period of time because I was afraid, and I convinced myself that doing that was a better option. But because it is difficult, so that's brave. But I don't think it was brave for him just to go out. He was just trying to be a gay man and wanted to feel inclusive. And that brings up so many points of curiosity for me. Like, where do these men get sex? And, why should it be? Like, when I considered getting an escort, why do I have to get an escort? Look, why is that my only option? Why couldn't I find an access to a group of men that maybe were open to having sex with me? Like, and it's, where do I find those men? And do I need to go on a message board, or do I need to go into another app that promotes that? Or does there need to be a pull down menu that says I'm into disabled men? Because let me tell you, there's a lot of guys that are into disabled men.
How do you think if someone who was in a wheelchair or had a disability went to somewhere like Wed on Wellington or Porter Street or any of those kind of sex on site venues, how do you think they'd be received?
Well, I think that I'm hoping that they'd be received openly, but I'm going back to my point of navigation and accessibility is that, like, if I went to Porter Street, like, I would have to have a carer because I wouldn't be able to get into the pool, or I wouldn't be able to get out of my chair and onto the bed on my own. And so it just becomes this sort of this organizational nightmare. So I would hope, and I'm going to put my hand on my heart when I say this, that the venue owners and the attendants would be open to that. And I worked at Club 80 for a while. And I remember when I worked at Club 80, we were very inclusive. But the venues that you mentioned are more wet saunas, wet venues. And so it brings up so much OH&S stuff.
Club 80 does have a massive amount of stairs to get to the front door.
Yeah.
Or at least they did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, they do.
So it kind of makes it a little bit prohibitive then for someone in a wheelchair to be able to go there.
Well, the thing is that when you enter Club 80, there's a door that brings you into the bottom part of it. So you can actually have access to one floor without going up those stairs. So there's ways in. And I'm sure, I don't know, is it law that you've got to have disability access?
I believe it is nowadays, yes.
Yeah. So there would be access, but I think the question that you're asking is more about people.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I probably I wasn't brave enough to, I wouldn't go. I wouldn't have tried that. I probably would have been it would be uncomfortable to be rejected as often.
It would be really interesting if there is anyone who is living with a disability and part of our community, has any thoughts or comments or anything they'd like to add, please drop me a line, lawrence@releasehypnosis.com.au. It'd be great to hear from you, perhaps even chat with you. Likewise, if you have any questions for Joe, please feel free to send them in, and we'll see about getting Joe back for another episode if he's open to it, to answer some of those questions and explore it further.
I mean, one thing that I would be interested in hearing from your show is, my disability was something that came about through circumstance, but I'd be interested to know what does someone experience if they've been disabled all their life?
Yeah.
Because that might be a totally different, all the things that I've had to process, all the doubts and all that would not be there for those people.
You've had a paradigm shift. You've had to go from being in one version of you to another version of you. You're absolutely right. For someone who was born with disability, it's not like they're changing who they are. That's who they've always been. And how do they feel that they integrate, or if they do integrate, into our community?
Yeah. So that'll be an interesting show.
Yeah. So look, thank you once again, Joe, for your time today. It's been absolute pleasure talking to you and really fascinating. And as I said before, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, feel free to drop us a line, lawrence@releasehypnosis.com.au. And I hope you'll join us for the next episode. In the meantime, thanks, Joey.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Lawrence.